Yeah, I know y'all feel it. I know you see it. I know you smell it. Training camp season is in the air. That means the NFL season is here. Once camps go underway, once we get that report that they showing up for camp, football season is officially underway, which means your drafts are coming up. Your redrafts, your work leagues, your home leagues are coming up. And you got a team out of Duval County. They got a lot of pass catchers that people are excited about. Young rookie out of LSU, big play Gabe Davis from Buffalo. You got Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, Evan Ingram at tight end. And you've got the highest damn paid quarterback in NFL history, right up there with Joe Burrow, 55 M's a year, and Trevor Lawrence. Year 3 in Doug Pederson's system. 2022, he came in, made strides. Last year, Trevor Lawrence played very well. Missed a game, but played very well. 2024, the expectations are high for Jacksonville. But this team is going to look a little bit different. And from a fantasy perspective, we're trying to figure out which cat we want. Which one of these wide receivers, or 2 or 3, do we really want to invest in for fantasy football? Well, damn it, y'all came to the right place, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to pull up our score, talk through some Trinity, talk some real ball stuff. What has happened in Doug Pederson's offenses with the wide receivers historically? What does Trevor Lawrence like to do? And where should you place your bets for the Jacksonville Jaguars pass catchers? Y'all know what it is, baby. You got to trust that Trinity. Let's talk ball.
Okay, let's get it. Bitch, let's get it. Woo!
Before we talk about any wide receiver, if you're new to the channel, thank you for giving me a little bit of time. And if you've been here before, appreciate you tapping into this video. If you stick around until the end and you find the information actionable and or entertaining, the only thing that I ask that you do is hit that thumbs up button. And if you want more content, subscribe, comment below. Let me know what you think about this information, this conversation. The pass catchers. Before you get to them, you got to talk about the QB. Trevor Lawrence going in to his 4th season in the NFL. It started off rocky under Urban Meyer, but the past 2 years under Doug Pederson, things have turned around. Trevor Lawrence finished last year 13th in scoring on a point per game basis for the quarterback position, right around 17 points per game, again, missing 1 game. 4,000 passing yards, over 20 passing touchdowns. He also added over 300 rushing yards and 4 rushing TDs, which is kind of like an added T-Law bonus. My man can move around. But when you're talking about Trevor Lawrence, you're talking about him being one of the highest paid quarterback right up there with Joe Burrow in NFL history. You're talking about a player that's going to throw the damn ball. So what do the Jags want to do? What has Doug Pederson historically done? Let's take a look. Historically, there are certain routes that wide receivers run that score more fantasy points than others, and there are quarterbacks who are better at throwing those type of routes. Talked about this on the last video with the Green Bay Packers. The 3 routes that the wide receivers have run over the last 5 years that have scored more fantasy points are the go route, where you're just screaming straight down the field, catching those vertical flies. The hitch route, where you're running deeper routes, breaking it off, turning around, catching the ball, and using your ability after the catch to make defenders miss. And the out route. These are cheap, quick, easy targets that you can stretch the field, or you can throw the ball to the wide receiver short. So those are the 3 routes you want your wide receivers running. You got some other routes in there, crossing routes, in-breaking routes, wide receiver screens that help you score more points. But historically, those are the 3 routes you want your wide receivers running, period. Go route, out route, hitch route. Those are the ones that are scoring the fantasy points for the wide receiver position. So let's take a look at what Doug Pederson has historically done in his offenses, in his deployment and usage of those wide receivers. The go route, 5.13 points per targeted route for the wide receivers. So when they're running go routes, they're scoring about 5 points per game off of that route. The hitch route, 5.7 fantasy points per game on the hitch route when targeting the wide receiver in a Doug Pederson offense. And then finally, the out route, 5.9 points per game when the wide receiver is targeted on those 3 routes. Those are the routes you want your receivers running in a Doug Pederson-led offense. Now, let's take it one little step deeper and talk about wide or slot. So on the go route, 61% of the time, those routes are going to the wide receiver that is lined up on the outside, right? Not talking about the slot player. We're talking about your X, your Z, a player lined up on the outside. 61% of the time, those 5 points per game, those are going to the guys lined up on the outside. The hitch route, 72% of the time, outside wide receivers getting those hitch routed targets, all right? And then the out route, a little closer, 55% to the outside, 45% of the time, those are your slot wide receivers. This is important. This is very important. Where you line up, outside or inside, very important and heavily influences the type of fantasy points that your wide receivers or your pass catchers score in your offenses. Now that we've got what has historically scored the most points across the NFL, the go, the out, and hitch route, we know what Doug Pederson has historically done as a head coach or an offensive coordinator, the go, the hitch, and the out route. And just for optional completeness, the next closest route that scores the most points in a Doug Pederson-led offense is the crossing route, 4.01 points per game on crossers going across the field. So there are only 3 routes over 5 fantasy points per game, go, hitch, and out route. We know what works in the NFL. We know what Doug Pederson wants to do, but what does T-Law like to do? What are some of the things that Trevor Lawrence likes to do and some of the things that Trevor Lawrence does well? Let's take a look. Last year in 2023, no surprise, the number 1 scoring route that Trevor Lawrence threw to was the go route. The only route on the route tree that got him over 3.5 points per game when targeting the wide receiver, go route, screaming straight down the field. That's your 9 route. Followed by the hitch route, 2.17, and the out route, 2.16 fantasy points per game. Those were the only 3 routes to be over 2 points per game when you're targeting the wide receiver. So again, you can see on this chart where the stars are, this is what Trevor Lawrence wants to do. These are the routes that are scoring the most points inside of the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Think about that. Down the field goes, out route, short or deep, in those hitch routes. Kind of like a comeback. Hitch, you're running 10, 15 yards down the field, 12 yards, stop, turn it around, get it, make something happen. That is what Trevor Lawrence has done and done well. Now, with that in mind, knowing Doug Pederson wants to do it, knowing Trevor Lawrence does a really good job at throwing those 3 routes in particular, we've got to take a look at the pass catchers and see what they have historically done to kind of start to put the pieces together as to who's going to be the guy that you want to roster from this Jags offense. Let's start by talking about a player who's no longer on the roster. Calvin Ridley took his talents to Tennessee. Last season, Calvin Ridley scored 13.5 fantasy points per game. That was 27th overall in the NFL. Not great. Put him right outside of that wide receiver 2 category, but he ran a lot, and I mean a lot of routes. As you can see on this route chart, his top 3 routes for scoring points were, no surprise, the out route, the go route, and the hitch route. The 3 things that Trevor Lawrence wants to do well, Calvin Ridley was over 2 points per game in all 3 of those categories. And when you're talking about the hitch route, 3.29 fantasy points per game, it was the highest point per game total on any targeted route for any Jacksonville Jaguar pass catcher in 2023. So the things that Lawrence likes to do well, Calvin Ridley also was successful in those routes. Now let's take a look at Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, probably the leader for the guy who should be targeted the most right away, but we'll talk about that. You'll see on Christian Kirk's route tree as well, the go route, the hitch route, and the out route, the 3 routes that Christian Kirk had the most success running and when targeted, scored over 2 fantasy points per game on all 3 of those routes. Now, a little higher on the go route percentage for Christian Kirk than Calvin Ridley, but Ridley's got him by almost a half a point when running those hitch routes. And then the out route, both of those guys are right around the same area. Now, the final player we're going to take a look at is newly acquired wide receiver Gabe Davis. Now, this chart looks a lot different than Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley. There's a lot of red, a lot of yellow on here. The only thing that is green is the hitch route. Over 3 points per game when targeted on hitch routes, but the go route, sub 1.5. The out route, not even 1 point per game for Gabe Davis on those out routes. No comeback routes. He doesn't run the post. He doesn't run a lot of in-breaking routes. This does not scream a player who is going to come in and command targets out the gate for Trevor Lawrence. He just has not been asked to do the type of things that Christian Kirk nor Calvin Ridley have been asked to do across the course of their career. And he has not demonstrated the type of things that Trevor Lawrence likes to do well or what Doug Pederson and his offenses have historically done for the wide receiver. Now, the final player we need to take a look at is incoming rookie wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. Now, this is a little bit of a projection because you're just taking what he did from college and trying to equate that to what he might be able to do in the NFL. Well, let's take a look at it. Now, the college game is very, very different. It is a vertical game. You are playing above the rim. You are playing down the field. So for most collegiate receivers, you're going to see this go route point per game total extremely high. Brian Thomas Jr. averaged 22 points per game last year in college, which was good for top 10 in the country. His number one route, the go route, almost 10 points per game on go routes, 5 points per game on hitch routes, and they did not run a lot of outs at LSU. Brian Thomas barely was targeted there. You see a mere 0.21 points per game. So when you look at what BTJ did in college and you think about what Trevor Lawrence wants to do, push the ball downfield vertically, use your athleticism after the catch on those hitch routes to make plays. 2 out of 3 for Brian Thomas and a very good offense playing alongside a top 10 pick in Malik Neighbors. So when I'm thinking about Jacksonville and what they're potentially going to roll out next season, I'm telling you right now, Christian Kirk, he is the slot. There's no doubt about it. Christian Kirk is the slot player. They're not going to kick him outside. He's never done it. He's going to be on the inside. So for you, as the person who's got to press draft on one of these players, you're making a decision between Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis. And I don't want to just dismiss Gabe Davis. He's been in the league since 2020, so he's experienced. He knows how the NFL game is. And with these rookies, you just don't know. They can have all these great peripherals, and you get in the NFL, and they're absolute garbage. But I don't believe that's going to be the case for Brian Thomas. And I believe that Gabe Davis is probably a lot closer to the things that he's already demonstrated in the NFL, opposed to reforming and reshaping how he plays the game into something else here in 2024. And for that, we're going to trust the Trinity. Go to DestinationDevy.com, pull up the Trinity tool, and talk about some of the ranges of outcomes for these players. Now, right now, we're taking a look at an opportunity and utilization tool called Trinity that you can find on our website, DestinationDevy.com. And essentially, all this score is showing you is which wide receivers are doing the most fantasy-friendly stuff to yield fantasy points. A higher score does not always mean a higher fantasy finish, but what that means is inside of that offense, that receiver is asked to do more things that score fantasy points than the other. And when we look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and their 2023 scores, opportunity and utilization scores, you see Christian Kirk led the way with a score of 7.51. The beautiful thing about this tool and this score is we have tracked it back to 2018, and its hit rate at identifying successful players is hitting at a 60% clip year over year. So Christian Kirk, 7.51, very good score, puts him in a historical wide receiver 3 range. You've got Calvin Ridley, who was not asked to do quite as much as Christian Kirk when they were on the field, but he did score more points per game with 13 points a game for Calvin Ridley. Trinity Score right at a 6.91. You see Gabe Davis here from the Buffalo Bills. 5.6 Trinity Score for Gabe Davis in 2023. Again, it's just utilization and opportunity. You want to see players above 6. I'm just going to put it that way. You want to be above 6, and then there's really no reason to talk about anybody else. I'm sure people will point to Parker Washington, but with the score of 1 in year 1, this does not bode well historically for Parker Washington. Now, again, the beautiful thing about this opportunity and utilization tool is that it is predictive and correlative for fantasy success in the following year, and we're going to pull that up right now. This is probably the most important tab on the tracker. It's the historical data tab, tracking back to 2018. Trinity Score in year 1 versus fantasy points in the following year. You see this clean upward trajectory for this line. This is where the magic is made right here. This is showing the correlation. So what I like to do at this step of the process is remember those scores. Gabe Davis, 5.6. Calvin Ridley, 6.9. Christian Kirk, 7.5. And what you want to do is go to this chart and look at players, similar situations, similar schemes, similar roles. Check out what they scored when opposed to Calvin Ridley or Christian Kirk, and look at what their fantasy finish was in the following year. So Christian Kirk, we know he was a 7.5. So let's look at players around 7.5, and would you look at that? Christian Kirk in 2022, 7.55, scored 12 and a half fantasy points per game this season. There's another Christian Kirk back in 2018 as a rookie, 7.44 Trinity Score in his rookie season. The following year, he scored 12.9. So you got Christian Kirk around this same sort of range that he similarly scores. And I bet you there's another Christian Kirk right here, 7.3, 10 fantasy points per game. So if I were going to make a bet based on this tool, his utilization, his opportunity, I'm going to believe that Christian Kirk is going to hang out in the same range that he's historically been his entire career. He's been around the 7.0 to 7.4. Here's 2021, 7.0, 14 points per game. This is where Christian Kirk has been throughout his career. I am not going to make the bet that he's going to ascend to a higher level, playing primarily out of the slot with a historical opportunity and utilization score between 7 and 7.5. Very, very good chance, 60% chance that this is the range that Christian Kirk will remain in. When you think about Gabe Davis, 5.6 score. This puts him in Kenny Sills, Danny Amendola, Randall Cobb, 5.6 score, 10 points per game the following season. You've got Allen Lazard here at a 5.5, scored about 10 points per game the following year. And then Gabe Davis himself is going to pop off in this range where he has historically sort of lived. There's 2021, 4.88 opportunity and utilization score for Gabe Davis. The following year, scored about 10 points per game. This is the range in which Gabe Davis lives. If I had to make another bet, following and trusting the Trinity, he's going to finish roughly between a 5 and a 6 Trinity score, and that's going to put him in this Courtland Sutton 2019 range, 14 points per game on a higher end. If you want to go crazy high, Deebo Samuel in 2020, opportunity and utilization, 5.6, scored 21 points per game. But you see where he is on the chart. That's your outlier, not the norm. The norm is right in here for Gabe Davis. So if you're going to go high end for Gabe Davis and he's going to live in that 6 to 5 range, can he give you 2019 Juju, 14 points per game? 2018 Courtland Sutton, 14 points per game. If he's in that 6.2 range, 2020 Mike Evans, it's on the very high end, 16 points per game. But if we go down to some median to lower averages, you got Michael Gallup, 7 points per game. Zay Jones, 8 points per game with that similar score. So if I had to make a bet, and I'm going to trust this tool that is predictive at a 60% clip, Gabe Davis is probably going to continue to finish in the same range that he historically has his entire career. And to further highlight that, we can group this out by his draft class. So looking at the 2020 class, let's really peek where Gabe Davis is looking like. So here he is, 2021, 4.8. Got another Gabe Davis down here, 3.63. And then his highest finish, you had this in 2022, 6.07. In this past year, he regressed down to about a 5.6. So historically, this is the range Gabe Davis lives in. I'm not banking on him doing anything in that offense that's going to ascend to a level that you have to have him for fantasy. I don't feel like I'm saying anything that's crazy here. That's what Gabe Davis is. That's who he's going to be. And for completeness, let's take a look at Christian Kirk. Again, you see all of his plots clustered together. Here's Christian Kirk 2022, 7.5. Christian Kirk, 7.4. Christian Kirk, 7.3. Christian Kirk living in this range right here for 4 years of his career since 2018. This is what Kirk is. I'm going to bet this is probably where, when healthy, he finishes the 2024 season in this range right here. And you just see, look at DJ Moore, 2019, DJ Moore, 2020, DJ Moore, 2021. And when all the stars align, i.e. your quarterback, your offensive coordinator, the system all converge together, when those three things meet, your quarterback, your opportunity, and your scheme, those three things, that is how you achieve Trinity in fantasy football. Those opportunistic offenses, those players that are doing more in their offense as opposed to the other receivers, that is the beauty of the score. And when you're thinking about the Jacksonville Jaguars and all the things that they want to do well, the things that T-Law does well, the things that Doug Pederson has historically asked of his wide receivers, there's no doubt about it. Christian Kirk is the slot. Gabe Davis is going to play out wide on one side, but my money on the player that's going to come in and actually produce and give us those type of fantasy performances and finishes that we want. It's crazy to think that I'm going to be so high on a rookie, but Brian Thomas Jr. literally has the thing and the things that this team, this quarterback, and this scheme seem to want to deploy. Brian Thomas Jr., that's the wide receiver I want in Dynasty. That's the wide receiver I want in seasonal leagues. I'm going to make a bet that this rookie wide receiver, along with Christian Kirk, those are going to be the two primary playmakers that you want off of this wide receiver core for fantasy football. Give me all the Brian Thomas Jr., baby. I'm trusting the Trinity. Appreciate y'all tapping into this video, talking to the pass catchers, the routes that matter, the schemes that they want to run, and the deployment and the usage of these quarterbacks to wide receivers. Check out the Trinity Tracker on DestinationDevy.com. Comment below. Let me know what you think about the data, the information, the usage, the positional battles. I'm excited. Duval County, stand up. If y'all appreciated the video, thumbs up button, like, comment, subscribe, and until next time, I'm out of this thing. Peace.